Welcome to the show, Chris Graham and Ray Petree. We're going to talk wrestling here on this Friday. Review AEW Dynamite's fifth anniversary show on Wednesday night. And actually, Ray, I didn't say this before we hit record, but you also had a column earlier in the week, the top five matches all time in AEW on Dynamite. And we'll talk about that during this show, too. We'll also talk for our listeners, viewers out there, we'll talk ratings information. And we'll talk about the AEW TV deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. Ray, I thought it was funny when I was watching the show Wednesday night. Had just posted your column the day before. Went back and I put the YouTube links to the matches, so got me nostalgic for some of those matches. There was a lot of commonality between your top five and the top five that they aired. They I don't know if they only aired five matches clips, but they aired a lot of clips during the show. Great matches from Dynamite over 5 years. There were a lot of matches that you picked that they picked as well, it seemed like to me.
You know, when I was a kid growing up, I couldn't afford a lot of pay-per-views. My dad just wouldn't allow it in the allowance. So I'd watch Raw and SmackDown, and I just wish there was better wrestling on those shows. For so long, we've been indoctrinated by the evil empire that television wrestling is a certain thing. At least people of my generation, and Dynamite has been such a welcome change to that dichotomy that you can have really, really great wrestling on free television. Is anything free anymore in that regard, especially Turner, but it's so hard to get those on streaming services. But yeah, I mean, you know, um, they know what matches are great. They know what matches have been really defining for that show. So it was nice to feel vindicated in that regard. But
I talked about when we were talking about the show beforehand. We said we'd start with reviewing the show, but I kind of want to go back real quick to those some of those matches you picked out. Um, and we'll start 5-1 maybe. That's a good way to do it. Um, Five greatest matches done in my history. Your number five was from 2021 Holiday Bash, CM Punk, Sting, Darby Allin versus MJF and FTR. I mean, you don't have to say much more than the names of the people in the match to talk about how good this match was back in 2021.
I am a devout CM Punk fan. I've been a fan since I was a kid, and I've been a big Sting fan since I was a little kid. So when I was growing up, that was we talk about dream matches. To me, a dream match is a match you don't think can happen. And to me, that was the dream match to see them team up together. So Holiday Bash 2021, night one, just seeing those two together was like the creme de la creme for me. But then you throw in Darby Allin, FTR, MJF. If you read my columns every week, you know that those are six of my favorite wrestlers in AEW, obviously withstanding Punk at this point. But yeah, I just, to me, that is six-man tag wrestling at its finest when you just have this sort of Justice League of a roster of guys working together or, wrestling in this case. But
Reminds me too that FTR, they've been versatile. They've been faces for so long, but they were heels back then, and teaming with MJF, that had forgotten about that era almost because of how long they've been faces. Now we move to number four, FTR versus the Young Bucks from Dynamite 131 in 2022. One of these two groups, memorable matches and dream matches. I mean, back when the FTR finally made the move over from WWE to AEW. We look forward to these two teams meeting up, and we've seen them a few times now.
you made a great segue. This is right at that interstice where they were still in the pinnacle, but they were slowly turning babyface. They weren't exactly agreeing with what MJF was doing. And I think this match, you could really lock it down to this point where they turned because they were still sort of heels. And then they wrestled the Young Bucks, who were definitely heels, and they looked so much better exiting it as baby faces. It's hard to hate FTR. They just love professional wrestling so much. And I think that's why they've become so popular in the last, I guess, 2.5 years now since they turned face. They're fan favorites. And this is, I mean, not as good as their first match, but very great.
So now we're going to go to the top three matches are going to be singles matches. with the company's top stars. And it's hard to really say between one, two, and three that
Yes.
there's a lot of separation here, but we'll go with three. Hangman Adam Page, Bryan Danielson, winter is coming 2021. I remember this one. Like it was yesterday.
Yeah. You and I, coincidentally, were both not together, but we were both at the show in Norfolk where Adam Page returned to Virginia with the title and had that face to face. I was sitting in the not on the floor, but in the front row of the bleachers, and someone took a picture of me on TV between them both. And it's something that that picture means a lot to me. But to see those two have that hour-long draw, Danielson had not been pinned or submitted yet in AEW. Um, what a titanic clash! It went a long way into making Hangman Page look like a true champion, true world's champion. And really, that was the highlight of his title reign. I mean, after that Bryan Danielson feud, it really went downhill. But that match was so fantastic. I know you're a big Cornette fan. I remember he gushed over it. He said it was the best TV match he had seen in I mean years since he was involved in the business, probably. Yeah, that was a fantastic match.
And it set up the next one between these two when they had another hour time limit. It was maybe a month later, a
Yes.
couple weeks later, something like that. And they had an hour time limit, and then Page won in like 30. It was after the 30-minute mark, maybe, but they used this match, great match in itself, to train us and swerve us in a few
Yeah.
weeks. I like that too. All right, let's head number two. Will Ospreay, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, July 17th, 2024. Not that long ago.
No.
But yeah, this is another one. This is one just like, I mean, this one didn't quite go 60 minutes. It went 59 minutes and 58 seconds, if I remember.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I didn't want to exhaust the phrase before, but a lot of hour-long matches, you can tell someone's going in and out. The way they reserve themselves, it eventually becomes clear they're going to go Broadway, go an hour. Um, just like the Hangman versus Danielson match, this match was a marathon, but the pace was fast. I mean, these are an Olympic level marathon between these two. Um, and what really amazes me, it speaks to the testament of this match, is they did so much, and yet they left something on the table for their rematch at All In. I I love MJF and I love Will Ospreay, and to see sort of the brightest young babyface and the brightest young heel share that stage for nearly an hour was incredible. And maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment. Maybe that match should not be above Hangman versus Danielson, but it is what it is, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Only thing I'm jealous of is that so that show was in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I think that's right. And then a couple weeks later, I was at the most recent Norfolk show,
Yeah,
and we didn't get Will Ospreay, Maxwell Jacob Freeman for almost an hour. But one other thing I love with the booking of this is, again, we're trained to think, as you noted. I mean, at a certain time, if they get past a half hour, okay, maybe this one's going Broadway. It's going an hour. Especially they started the show with this match, and so that's also something that Tony Khan has done in the past. Hey, I want to start the show with this match to give it the full length, so that if I started the match at 9 o'clock, you might think it's going to go an hour. I want you to have to guess with me on this,
yeah,
but then we get to the last few seconds, and MJF gets to win. So here we are thinking, oh, it's going to go a draw, and
yeah.
then we get a pinfall. So totally out of left field. Love that part of the booking as well. All right, so number one, and I remember just, when this match was announced back in 2021 for Grand Slam, Bryan Danielson, Kenny Omega. I was like the crowd. I remember the live crowd when the bell rang and the two guys were standing on opposite sides of the ring from each other, and the crowds in New York City is already chanting, "This is awesome."
Yeah.
Just the idea of Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega at this time, I mean, this is a few years ago now. Omega's still not that far off from being the number one wrestler in the world in the PWI 500. Bryan Danielson being Bryan Danielson.
Yeah.
Just the anticipation of this was as good as the actual match, which was great.
I could write a novella about this match. These guys had wrestled a handful of times in the 2000s, in the late 2000s, in PWG and in Ring of Honor. which are worth looking up. But that nothing compares to the quality that this match brought. 20,000 people in Arthur Ashe Stadium. And I've been going back and watching these old WrestleManias. We're specifically up to 7 so far. And some of those WrestleManias didn't have a crowd this big. I mean, in New York, this was just what a feat for AEW. I know TNA only had one crowd over 10,000, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think it was in America. So, I could argue you could argue this is sort of the pinnacle of AEW, the peak that it's reached in terms of the momentum it had. The show did over 1 million views, and the match was fantastic. Danielson going from WWE, where he had that great program with Roman Reigns, right to AEW, still in the world title picture, made Kenny Omega look fantastic. Not that he really needs it, but he made him look that much better. I mean, it's going to be hard to beat this match on television.
And Bryan Danielson, now he's the world champion in AEW finally after all these years, but he spent the first 3-4 years that he was there elevating other guys. And he, as you mentioned, to a lot of people of us, Kenny Omega didn't need to be elevated, but to a certain segment of the audience that did not have the history with New Japan Wrestling, PWG back in the day, Ring of Honor, he needed some extra legitimacy, and Bryan Danielson could do that. And so Danielson, ultimate team player, CM Punk when he was in AEW, same way. But they would put guys over, or in this case, this was a draw, so there was no putting over, but there was elevation going on there, and Danielson played that role in 2 of these 3 matches we talked about. So let's move on now to the show Wednesday night. So we've been talking about the last 5 years of AEW, and now the 5-year anniversary show, and what a microcosm, Ray, of what you've talked about. As a kid growing up, you watching Raw and SmackDown and thinking this is the way it had to be, not very good television wrestling. When I was growing up, TV wrestling was squash matches. So
Right.
kind of similar, I mean, I still have an affinity for squash matches for some reason. I don't know. It's just a childhood thing maybe, but yeah, now we had 5, we just reviewed 5 years of great matches in AEW on Dynamite. This show itself had quite a few good matches to keep your attention for 2 hours.
Uh, when I saw Danielson versus Okada, I think that match was announced shortly after we posted the article. I believe I was like, well, maybe this could end up on it if it had just been a week earlier. That's the kind of match you expect of these two, and maybe it clouded my judgment, my expectation for this match, because it was good, but it wasn't as good as the first and second match. But I mean, wow, to have those two in the main event of Dynamite. I can't think of a better way to celebrate 5 years, given who's healthy on the roster right now. That was a fantastic match. I'm sorry to start at the end, but
Yeah.
I mean, what a fantastic bout between those two. Okada kind of, I think Excalibur said, parking the bus, to borrow a football expression. And that first 20 minutes wrestling defensively, both of those guys know how to make wrestling look like a combat sport, given its own gravity and things like that. So I really enjoyed that match.
Yeah, and you're right. This match was announced late for the show. It's the icing on the cake because I mean, I'll mention the matches quickly and then we'll review them. We already knew Will Ospreay and Ricochet, and that's the match we got started with. We already knew about Hangman Adam Page and Juice Robinson. The Britt Baker DMD versus Serena Deeb match, I was very much looking forward to. Britt Baker returning home to Pittsburgh, and so we knew we had some good matches already. And oh, by the way, now we're going to give you Danielson Okada. So let's start at the top of the show. The AEW has recently gone back to what it had been doing for a while, starting with just an opening match. A guy's already coming to the ring for a match. Um, I'm with you. In your review, you talked about these cold opens with, in this case, it was a really well done, well shot, well packaged message from the BCC to Bryan Danielson. I'm like, I think you start a show off this way to build anticipation, so I agree with you on that this was pretty well done.
I love, we've talked about it on this show before, me and you. Neither of us are big fans of the Blackpool Combat Club. I've never seen the value in having Moxley and Danielson in the same faction. But what I will say is I've always loved how they've tried to bring along Wheeler Yuta and give him some credibility. And I think the goal ultimately has always been that Wheeler Yuta leaves this faction more reputable than when he entered it. So it was nice seeing them put Wheeler Yuta right in the center of this, that he's part of the Trios champions. They want him to stay, but they need him uh, to file in line and listen to them and believe what they're saying is, whatever they're saying is the right way. So I'm glad to see him put in the center of this, and obviously the show ended with that. But I love the cold opens, and maybe I'm conditioned to that because of Raw, but I think it's a great way to start the show and give it a through line to the ending.
Let's skip to back to the end then. We've already talked about the final match, so we didn't talk about how things ended with that final match. But okay, so and I agree with you too. The whole point of combat, the Blackpool Combat Club should have been to elevate young wrestlers. That's what they stated when they started this group back with William Regal back a few years ago. Okay, so we had the match on Collision last weekend where Yuta did team with the guys and snapped. They goaded him into healing out at the end of that match to get the submission. And here, so that puts him in a place. And now the way the after the main event ended the way it did with the shot, the interference, so to speak, the distraction and pinfall. Um, then we get, the post-event schmaz, and now, I mean, Yuta is getting put in the spotlight. It kind of reminds me of how AEW did this a couple of years ago with Daniel Garcia, then kind of dropped the ball. Not kind of did drop the ball big time with Daniel Garcia, but they're putting the young guy in a spot where now it makes me think, hey, from a storyline perspective, are they going to have him maybe, he's going to team with Danielson against the other two veteran guys? And is he going to be the babyface hero? Is he going to turn on him? I mean, this now we're asking questions about Wheeler Yuta. We've not done that in his existence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested to see whether he turns on Danielson and where his loyalties lie. I guess is lack of a better phrase. I'm excited for the match because I think all four of those guys are great wrestlers, including Wheeler Yuta in the ring between the ropes, regardless of how he might look or how he might talk. He's great in the ring. He's a great chain wrestler. And that's the kind of wrestling I like. So I've always enjoyed his matches. Um, I'm excited to see where this goes leading into WrestleDream. And I mean, I hope Wheeler Yuta stays face, but we'll see. I guess we'll find out next week.
Yeah, I watched the shows a lot of weeks with a friend, and I raised that point. Hey, maybe they can turn him heel. And then the friend made the point. Well, if he turn him heel though, doesn't he just kind of go back to being one of three heels versus being a baby face? But I don't, I can see it going either way. I can, we can see. But I loved, if we're asking questions, that's a good thing in wrestling. Will Ospreay Ricochet. Okay, so you had to figure, when I'm watching this, I'm thinking there's no way either of these guys can get a pinfall loss against them or a submission loss against them, a clean loss, either way. And so there's going to have to be some sort of ending. And you in your review, I like you pointed out, yeah, kind of knew that, but and it was disappointing to see the way it ended in one sense. But now that we're seeing that the main event, or not main event, one of the matches at WrestleDream is going to involve the guy who interfered at the end, Konosuke Takeshita, in a three-way. I don't, I mean, Takeshita's interesting. He's a solid guy. He's needed to push, and maybe this will be a way to get one. And then obviously Osprey and Ricochet. This match itself was great, and I'm looking forward to the triple threat.
I saw actually a few hours ago, Dave Meltzer gave it 4.5 stars out of five, or out of whatever, I guess, 4.5 stars, which, I don't know about that, but it was a good match. I like the double pinfall finish. I thought if you're going to swerve expectations, that was a good way to start. I wish it had gone time limit and they had teased Don Callis and it never happened. I think that would really pop fans. I would like to have seen it go 30 minutes to do a time limit draw, but maybe I was writing that article for a day and then I got in my head that it was going to be a time limit draw. But um, you know, this is kind of tangential, but I don't like the posing where they do the flips and they pose at each other. I'm not a big fan of that. So I don't know. There was a little too much like these guys are in their own little world right now, but it was a fun match. And I mean, both of them are insanely, absurdly talented. They're way too good at wrestling, and they do moves so often that I don't think it devalues them, but it's like poison rhinos are not easy to do safely, and they're just trading it like because they're at such a different level. But
Yeah, they work. They need a guy like the other guy to work with to be at their best, and there's so few guys like them that they can work with to be at their best. So, um, as far as Takeshita goes, I look forward to that match because I've wanted that belt off of Osprey for a while. I understood it was a prop and it was it served its purpose in the MJF feud. Osprey needs to be in the world title picture, and he can't be in that with a secondary belt. A way for him to lose this though, and not lose face would be to have Takeshita pin Ricochet, using some sort of means too where Ricochet doesn't have to get anything on him. So a triple threat that's the that's the purpose of a triple
yeah,
threat, especially with a title. So let's see, going down the list here, Mercedes Monet and MVP. So Mercedes, we've talked about this. The rollout back in March. I mean, we haven't really gotten anything close to what we would have expected when we started speculating a year before she debuted that she was going to be coming to AEW. And now you enter into the equation MVP, who we've been talking about for a few weeks, is being ready to make his entree. He made his debut last week, and now he's making the rounds. I like what he's doing here. He's making the rounds. He's putting his card out to people. Who's going to join in with his alliance. But just the fact that Mercedes could be in this is, I mean, we're asking questions about Mercedes now, which is a good thing.
I think a lot of people foregone conclusion is it's going to be a carbon copy Hurt Business going to AEW. And while that would have been interesting, I think the Hurt Syndicate needs. Well, it's exactly what you said. You should be asking questions in wrestling to keep you tuned in. And I want to see who joins the Hurt Syndicate, not named Shelton Benjamin or Bobby Lashley. Um, and if that means he goes for a few weeks and he's handing out business cards to guys, I'm happy to see that. Last week we talked about Private Party potentially joining, or 2 weeks ago maybe, and now it looks like Stokely Hathaway is eyeing them. But I'm interested to see where this goes and who joins and who doesn't. And even if it's just a red herring, I'm fine with that.
I want managers to be used better in AEW and MVP. Managers need a mic.
Yeah.
Managers don't. Prince Nana doesn't get a mic. He does. He stands there on. Even Don Callis, who's great on the mic,
Yep.
doesn't get a mic very often. He does commentary during matches, but his commentary, he's a really good commentator, but his commentary is kind of down the middle. He's a analyst more than he is a heel commentator. So. Um, I would love to see some feuds between the managers, MVP and Nana and Stokely Hathaway, who has not been used to any great degree to the level he could be used. So, I mean, yeah, so maybe MVP coming into the equation will change things in AEW, and we'll use these guys to, back in the day, Bobby Heenan, all you had to do was if a new heel came to town and Bobby Heenan was his manager. I don't know who that guy is, but I know to hate him because Bobby Heenan's his manager. That's what we need to make managers be more often. And AEW has had a lot of good guys; they just haven't used very well.
I love Mark Sterling. I love Stokely Hathaway. I love Nana. All those guys are really great on the mic. Obviously, MVP. I mean, shy of Paul Heyman, I think MVP is the best in the business right now. And I think he's a level above anyone else besides Heyman. So I hope that, I mean, at least MVP, I hope he does a lot of the heavy lifting for, the people he represents, whether that's Lashley, Benjamin, or Powerhouse Hobbs, or Monet, or whoever, because you have to have guys who can convey it on the microphone. They can't get in the ring every week. And he's, like I said, I mean, maybe the best in the business besides Heyman.
Learning Tree and Mark Briscoe. We can skip through a lot of this except to say, all right, you called it cheap heat. I remember when the moment came up where Jericho said your brother Jay was a better wrestler than you'll ever be, to something to that effect. The friend that I watched the shows with most weeks said, "Wow, I mean that's pretty harsh." And one thing I know about wrestling is that it is what it is, but you work that stuff out ahead of time, but still, there was a glimpse of Mark Briscoe when Jericho said that, where okay, so he dropped the shtick, he dropped the over the top, I'm a hillbilly act,
Yeah.
and seemed genuinely mad. Then he after he left the ring, he was back into his pantomiming, but if this can unleash uh, uh, that Mark Briscoe, it can be a good thing.
I love Mark Briscoe. Anything Mark Briscoe does in any given week could probably be a hit on my column. And you're exactly right. He has that. He can bring that level of intensity that is rarely seen in wrestling to a point that it looks realistic, that it seems realistic, that it seems believable. Mark Briscoe can be a dog off the leash. He can really maul someone. He can be vicious. He can have that edge. He can be believable. And the conglomeration has sort of, I like the Saturday morning cartoon kind of WWF late 80s gimmick, but I like the them boys. I was a big Briscoes fan. So I'd love to see that. To your point, I'd love to see that against Jericho, and I'd love to see him flip that switch more often because he could be one of the biggest names in AEW, hold a major title, and really sell it every week.
Some of the best promos that I've seen in the last 5 years were not even on TV. It was when the Briscoes and FTR were uh, teasing each other on social media. And Jay, obviously his role in the Briscoes was he was the really good trash talker, but Mark too. And so I still can't get over every time I see Mark Briscoe. I think of what a tragedy it is. Not just that I mean, obviously that he passed away, but the tragedy that all this TV time that the Briscoes are getting now didn't include both Briscoes. The Briscoes deserve to be at the top level of the business years ago. We know why that wasn't the case. It was something that was said, was apologized for, should have been forgiven a long time ago, and that robbed a lot of fans who never got to see the Briscoes in action of seeing one of the top five tag teams of our time and maybe of all time.
Um, these are guys who, brothers who took wrestling as seriously as it could be taken in the 2000s, as it could be. And Jay made some remarks that I feel like his peers thought were in character given who they were being portrayed as. And I think, I mean, you look at someone like JD McDonough or formerly Jordan Devlin on WWE. I mean, the allegations are far worse than just saying things. And he's on TV every week. So,
Yeah, yeah.
anyways, but yeah, it's tragic. And to your point, those promos with FTR, and if you go even further back, the promos with the Young Bucks are stick out of my head as some of the best things any wrestlers just released on social media. They use social media to convey their point better than I think anyone in wrestling.
They sold three pay-per-views on social media. I mean,
Yeah.
they did. The only reason to watch those three Ring of Honor pay-per-views that FTR and the Briscoes were on was because of those promos.
Yeah.
And all right, let's roll through Adam Page, Juice Robinson. Okay, one, these two guys are great to watch with each other. We kind of knew going in it was a prelude to Adam Page against Jay White. Jay White made a special appearance, surprise appearance, even though we kind of knew it was coming at the end. But not to sell Juice Robinson short. He came out looking like, and I think one of the announcers recognized this and said this in the broadcast. I said to my friend watching this, Man, he looks like a miniature version of Bruiser Brody with that hair the way it was that night. And I think one of the announcers mentioned a Bruiser Brody reference. So solid match, and it did what it needed to do to set up something future.
Yeah, I think Shivani said he looked like Bruiser Brody mixed with Randy Savage.
Randy Savage, yeah, there you go, there you go.
Yeah, very good Smash Mouth match. These guys are both. I call it. I think they wrestle. It's a Japanese gaijin style. Smash Mouth, hard hitting, physical, um, heelish. Juice Robinson does as well. Obviously, he was playing the role of babyface, I guess, in this match. But these two really went at each other. It looked painful, which I guess means it looked real. And yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I love Juice Robinson and I love Hangman. So, and I love Jay White even more than either of them. So I'm really happy to see him back. And he looked jacked.
He did, yeah.
He looked insane. Like he's been, I don't know, juicing or something, but he looks great.
Britt Baker, hometown return. Serena Deeb. If you're going to have somebody make a return, because Britt Baker had been off for a few weeks, and she, of course, hadn't been back very long from being off for more than a year. If you want to bring somebody back and help them look good as they get over in front of a hometown crowd, you're not going to do much better than having Serena Deeb help put them over.
Serena Deeb lost again.
Yeah, yeah.
But like you said, and I said in the column, Britt Baker, the ring rust is obvious. She needs to work more matches. And the AEW schedule just doesn't permit someone to shake off that rust quickly. So you have her work with someone like Serena Deeb who can go through those sequences and maneuvers quickly because she's such a great chain wrestler. I thought this was a fun match, and Britt Baker looked better in it than she did against Mercedes Moné, which I guess is a positive. But like you said, I mean, it's been a month since she's wrestled, and before then, she only wrestled like 3 matches. So she needs to show up every week and wrestle, and eventually she'll get back to her old self.
This is where we miss the YouTube shows not being around anymore. You could put, uh, top stars, top guys and gals, and have them wrestle enhancement talent and just get them reps in front of a crowd. Even if the crowd at I think they did those in Jacksonville. Even if it wasn't a big crowd, it was still a few hundred people. A
Yeah.
live crowd versus wrestling in a gym in the afternoon. It's just not the same. Last thing we'll cover here real quick, Shelton Benjamin. Okay, so we talked earlier about uh, MVP. We knew that Benjamin was coming soon, but nothing leaked out, and we get Shelton Benjamin in a promo segment. So he's here. Things are falling into place.
Um, there probably were better ways to introduce him than this, but I did enjoy this a lot. It was funny. And I guess it's okay because Shelton Benjamin, we know Shelton Benjamin can go in the ring. I guess we don't need him to debut in the ring. It was a funny segment. I don't know if that means we're getting non-offers to Shelton Benjamin. But Shelton Benjamin is a wrestling machine. And I can't wait to see him in the ring against some of these guys.
Yeah, people don't realize. I had to tell my friend this, knowledge of wrestling history thing. Shelton Benjamin was him. He was before Brock Lesnar, the star wrestler at the University of Minnesota. And then you don't make a lot of money in amateur wrestling unless you're after you're done, unless you're a coach. So he was actually Brock Lesnar's coach at Minnesota.
Mhm.
Um, Benjamin is a guy. He never got the push that Brock Lesnar got or some other guys have gotten over the years. Not because he didn't deserve it, because he is maybe your uncrowned world champion of this era, the one guy of this era that you would maybe put at the top of the list to say, of all the guys who never had a run with a major belt, the best guy in the ring.
I don't know if they're on the Ring of Honor network because some of them were before Sinclair, but some of them are afterwards. His tag team with Charlie Haas,
Yeah, yeah.
his tag team in Ring
The
of Honor.
world's greatest tag team. Yeah.
Well, I mean, some amazing matches that are definitely worth seeking out if you're a wrestling fan and you weren't watching Ring of Honor back then, like a lot of people weren't. Great matches. So
Yeah, you had to find it back then. You really had to search for it back when it wasn't even Access TV. What was it? It was still HD Net, I think it was the
yeah,
network back then.
yeah.
So well, hey, we reviewed the show, so we're going to be talking next week, and I know that so for our listeners, viewers out there, Ray has the top 5 matches in AEW Dynamite history column that we referenced earlier. We'll link to that here in the YouTube description. We'll link to the review of this week's 5th anniversary Dynamite show in the description. I know that next week we'll be talking about, you'll be writing about, and we'll be talking about next week's Dynamite and then getting ready for WrestleDream next week. So a lot of stuff on the agenda here, Ray. Well, as always, thank you for your time, your insight. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.